In this segment, we will transition to the end of the colonial era and begin to look at the issues that would lead to the American Revolution. Recall from our discussion on Locke's second treatise of government that we explored the historical context surrounding his work. We did this to understand the issues that shaped his political philosophy. We will recall that in the 17th century there were two major controversies in English politics: religion and sovereignty. Monarchs in England up to Charles I had ruled by a concept known as divine right, which basically argued that the king received the right to rule from God. However, the Parliament became more assertive during this period and pushed back against divine right, arguing that the right to rule derived from the people. This disconnect had led to the English Civil War, after which the king was executed and England ruled as a commonwealth for about a decade. After the death of Lord Protector Oliver Cromwell, the monarchy was restored by Parliament, essentially establishing that the king ruled at the pleasure of Parliament. However, Charles II and his successor James II still asserted divine right. King James II, a staunch believer in divine right, became deeply unpopular. His daughter Mary and her husband, William of Orange, led a rebellion against him called the Glorious Revolution. It was called glorious because there was little bloodshed, and it re-established Parliament's right to rule. However, there was a lingering complication. James II fled England but never formally relinquished the throne. This led to internal political turmoil in Britain, which would have significant repercussions for its colonies in the following decades. This period is known as the Era of Benign or Salutary Neglect. Britain, in theory, remained the imperial power. This meant assuming responsibility for defending its vast territory, including the American colonies, the Caribbean islands, India, and others. However, preoccupied with domestic political struggles, Britain largely neglected enforcing its authority in the colonies. As a result, the American colonies essentially governed themselves. This era of salutary neglect lasted from approximately 1689 until 1763. The latter year marks the outbreak of a conflict between Britain and France, spilling over into the American colonies. The key takeaway is that England's internal political turmoil inadvertently fostered a tradition of self-government in the American colonies. It's tempting to think of the pre-revolutionary colonies as a nascent United States. However, this perception would be inaccurate. As we've discussed, colonists primarily identified with their specific colony rather than a broader American identity. Imagine living in Massachusetts during this period. Your primary sense of belonging wouldn't be to a national entity called America, but rather to the colony of Massachusetts itself. This local identity extended to other colonies as well. A Pennsylvanian wouldn't consider themselves American, but Pennsylvanian. Similarly, Virginians wouldn't identify as American, but Virginian. This localized identity was so strong that colonists might have viewed residents of neighboring colonies as foreigners. The analogy isn't perfect, but for us today, it might be akin to Californians considering Arizonans as entirely other. While some regional rivalries exist in the U.S. today, we all fundamentally share an American identity. This concept was absent in the colonial era. Local loyalties trumped any sense of a unified America. Please proceed to answer the questions in the assignment on Canvas. If you have any questions, you can post them in the open forum discussion or contact the professor using Canvas email.